Imagine standing in a line of armored men, shoulder to shoulder, your round bronze shield locked tightly with the ones beside it. The sun beats down on your helmet, the air is tense, and you hear nothing but the synchronized stomp of hundreds of feet. The clang of spears, tapping shields, and the roar of a commander shouting, "Advance." This isn't fantasies. Ancient warfare at its most brutal and disciplined. This is the world of the Greek hoplite, a world where freedom and tyranny were decided not by kings and palaces, but by ordinary citizens fighting in perfect unison on dusty battlefields. Today, we're diving deep into the hoplite revolution. Not just a change in tactics, but a seismic shift that transformed the very foundations of Western civilization. The hoplite revolution wasn't just a military phenomenon. It was a socio-political earthquake that redefined the nature of warfare, citizenship, and masculinity in the ancient world. Before the 7th century BC, Greek warfare was largely aristocratic. Battles were dominated by elite warriors on horseback or by lone champions dueling for glory. But the emergence of the hoplite phalanx changed everything. It replaced individual valor with collective discipline, shattered the monopoly of the aristocracy on warfare, and brought ordinary citizens, farmers, craftsmen, and tradesmen into the heart of military and political life. This was the dawn of a new era, a revolution of armor, strategy, and ideology. His values were rooted in his soil, his shield, and his standing among equals in the phalanx. This was not a mercenary army. These were men defending their city-states, not because they were paid to, but because it was their duty, a theme deeply resonant with conservative ideals of honor, duty, and personal responsibility. The revolution wasn't about technology, it was about values. And those values built the framework for what would eventually become the West. The phalanx was as much a political statement as a military formation. Imagine hundreds of men in tight formation, each dependent on the man to his right. There was no room for ego, no space for cowards. A hoplite's shield aspis was large and heavy, designed not to protect the individual but to guard the man beside him. The message was clear: in unity, there is survival. As historian John Keegan noted in A History of Warfare, the hoplite line was a moral as much as a physical formation. Each man's courage fortified his neighbor's resolve. To break ranks was not just cowardice, it was treason against the community. What made this so revolutionary wasn't just its battlefield efficiency, it was the way it demanded shared risk, and thus, eventually, shared power. In time, cities like Athens and Sparta began to reflect this military collectivism in their politics. In Athens, hoplite service became a prerequisite for citizenship. If you could fight, you could vote. This was a radical break from earlier systems where bloodlines and wealth determined one's political voice. The phalanx turned power horizontal. It laid the groundwork for the earliest forms of democratic governance and republican virtue, even if imperfect by modern standards. But let's not romanticize it blindly. This system was born out of necessity and struggle. In his The Greek State at War, W.K. Pritchett shows that the transition to hoplite warfare was not immediate or bloodless. It was a slow evolution marked by internal strife, class tensions, and political turmoil. The rich didn't want to give up control. But the sheer military necessity of cohesive infantry units forced even the elites to accept a broader participation in warfare. And once common men were fighting and dying for their city-states, it became increasingly difficult to deny them a voice in how those states were governed. Hoplite warfare also forged a new ideal of masculinity, stoic, disciplined, sacrificial. Unlike the Homeric hero who sought glory through individual feats, the hoplite earned honor by holding the line, enduring hardship, and dying without complaint. It was a masculinity of restraint, not flamboyance. Of service, not self-promotion. And this ideal didn't vanish with the phalanx. It echoed through Roman legions, medieval knightly codes, and even into modern military traditions. The hoplite was, in many ways, the prototype of the Western soldier. Now, let's talk equipment, because that's where ideology met steel. The hoplite panoply was heavy, unwieldy, and brutally effective. A bronze helmet with narrow eye slits that limited vision but maximized protection. A cuirass over the chest, greaves over the shins. And that iconic round shield, each piece had to be paid for by the soldier himself. This wasn't cheap, but it was a badge of honor. To own a panoply was to declare that you were a man, a citizen, a protector of your people. As the historian Paul Cartledge wrote in The Spartans, to be a hoplite was not merely to fight, was to belong. It was to possess the virtues of courage, discipline, and loyalty, embodied in bronze and blood. And this wasn't just about Athens and Sparta. City-states across the Greek world adopted the phalanx. In Corinth, Thebes, Argos, and even the distant colonies of Magna Graecia, hoplite warfare became the standard. Each region added its own twist, but the core remained the same: a wall of shields, a hedge of spears, a brotherhood in arms. In Sparta, the phalanx became almost religious in its discipline, producing the most feared infantry in Greece. Their training began in childhood, and their philosophy Molin Labe, come and take them, embodied the iron spirit of the hoplite ethos. If you're captivated by the grit, the discipline, and the honor that defined the hoplite soldier and how that tradition still echoes in today's values, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our ranks. We dive deep into the untold stories, the raw truths, and the powerful legacies of military history every week. As warfare evolved, so did the phalanx. By the time of the Persian Wars, hoplites were no longer just fighting each other in ritualized city-state clashes. They were defending all of Greece from existential threat. At Marathon in 490 BC, Athenian hoplites faced the mighty Persian Empire. Vastly outnumbered, they didn't flinch. In a bold and aggressive charge, they broke the Persian lines and stunned the world. It was the triumph of citizen soldiers over imperial might, and it would inspire generations to come. As historian Peter Green recounts in the Greco-Persian Wars, the hoplites at Marathon did not just save Athens, they saved the idea that free men, fighting for their homes, could defeat tyranny. But like all revolutions, the hoplite system eventually faced its own limits. As the Peloponnesian War dragged on, the rigidity of the phalanx clashed with the need for mobility and adaptability. Light troops, cavalry, and naval power began to challenge the supremacy of the heavy infantry. New styles of warfare emerged, especially under commanders like Epaminondas of Thebes and later Philip II of Macedon, who introduced deeper formations and integrated combined arms tactics. Yet even as tactics evolved, the cultural memory of the hoplite endured, and that cultural legacy is perhaps the most profound impact of the hoplite revolution. It shaped not just the military strategy of later empires, but the philosophical backbone of Western thought. The very concept of the citizen soldier would inspire the Roman Republic, the militias of early America, and even the political theory of men like Montesquieu and Rousseau. In The Origins of Political Order, Francis Fukuyama writes, "The Greek phalanx, by forcing elites to depend on the lower classes for victory, laid a foundational stone in the architecture of representative governance." It's no exaggeration to say that our modern democracies carry the faint echoes of clanging bronze from ancient Greek fields. We must also consider the moral clarity with which the Greeks viewed warfare. Unlike today's bureaucratized and sanitized conflicts, hoplite battles were personal, face-to-face, and brutally honest. There was no hiding behind drones or satellites. Victory came from discipline, courage, and above all, unity. And when a phalanx collapsed, it was not just a military loss, it was a societal one. Everything depended on the cohesion of the line. And that is a lesson we do well to remember. In a world increasingly fragmented and self-absorbed, the strength of the collective of, the community of shared values, is what gives a people its resilience. So the next time you see a round shield in a museum or hear tales of ancient warriors in bronze helmets, don't think of them as relics. Think of them as symbols. Symbols of a time when ordinary men stood together to face chaos and preserve order. When valor wasn't a boast but a duty. When freedom was earned not in the halls of power, but on the blood-soaked fields of battle. The hoplite revolution was indeed just a shift in weapons, it was a crucible where the ideals of the West were hammered into being. In the glint of bronze and the crush of shield against shield, we see the birth of an idea that still burns today, that freedom must be defended not with words, but with resolve. Stay strong, stay vigilant. And remember when the line must hold. Be the shield your brother can count on.